Hi, Sonia. Just do a sound check before we start so that you are receiving okay.
Greetings, Professor Andy. Yes, sir. Sound is good.
Okay, fine.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'm so glad to connect with you.
Thank you very much. I'm so great to hear you too.
Yeah, sure. Is the pharmacist Jean-Claude from Rwanda, Partners in Health.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome, Professor Andy. Welcome, Dr. Stephen. My name is Sonia from Empower. We will be joining the we will be starting the webinar as per the scheduled time.
Yeah,
and
okay.
I can hear Professor Andy and Dr. Stephen pretty well.
Yes, thank you very much, Sonia.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank
Hi,
you.
Ropa. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. Looking forward.
Good.
Edward, how are you?
Morning. Fine, and how are you?
Fine, Edward. I can see you there.
Thank you very much.
Prof. Andy, how are you?
Doing good, thanks. Yeah, it's been a long day, and we have a way to go yet. But
Oh yeah, we need it.
it's coming on for sunset here, so we're well along in the day. But
Oh,
okay, we're all-
yeah. I was wondering what you're talking about, the long days. And yet I'm still feeling very fresh here.
well, fortunately, we're Northern Hemisphere, so it's our longest day, so we're light a little bit longer.
Okay, I can see you have a very bright background there with a lot of sunshine.
Whereas I think you're enduring winter at the moment. Yeah.
You can see I'm putting on heavy jerseys.
Yes.
Yeah, it's cold. It's been very cold.
Yeah.
I think we are in the winter solstice.
Yes, we've just had the summer solstice, and of course tomorrow is the full moon, so it's
Yeah, so yeah,
a busy
21st
time
was
for
just,
us.
yeah, so we're happy the sun is coming back. Watch out.
Yeah. Well, here it's the peak of the fruit season for us, so we're full of guava and mango and bananas, so we're really enjoying times.
I enjoy it while it's still there. Eh?
Send us some mangoes.
Yeah.
And we need mango juice.
Well, we have to eat them quickly because the birds will take them if we don't.
Certainly.
That's living with nature. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Good morning, Professor Stephen, Professor Andy.
Good morning.
We all are ready for the webinar. People are joining in. That's great.
Yeah.
So has Professor Joseph has also joined? Rupa, good morning.
He's joining. He's joining anytime now.
Okay, that's great. So we have all the speakers?
It looks like.
Yeah.
One of them here, I can see Professor Andy there.
Yeah.
So he should be.
Great.
Dr. Makondo, maybe you need to adjust your camera there.
Hello?
Maybe you need to adjust your camera. I'm just seeing part of your head.
Okay, I'm just using my phone.
Oh. Yeah.
Good, I can see people are entering in. There are already 40 participants.
I can
And
see.
we have got,
Yeah.
we've got 5 minutes, so we'll wait for people to join.
Yeah, let me
Certainly, certainly. Yeah, they are joining.
Yes.
Okay, I see we have one request in the chat box for French language. Je regrette, aujourd'hui c'est seulement en anglais. If you require French language, please visit the Empower website. We do have French language courses available.
So maybe, and in the future, are we able to offer French as well, simultaneous translation?
No, my French is not that good. I can't do, but we can offer French language webinars. Yes, Dr. Denny Brun and Axel take care of that. But yes, we don't offer dual language translation. It becomes too confusing for people. We can do dual channel on Facebook, but it's difficult. So I think better we run separate webinars for English and French language. And for those
yes.
Okay. And we also run them in Thai and Indonesian if we have particular audiences. Yeah.
Okay, so we can then respond to the participant to say that these courses are available in French and they can look out for the French.
And they'll see the French language webinars as well. Again, very similar to the English language ones we do.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And some of the courses are multilingual. We have courses in Russian, Spanish, Portuguese as well.
Welcome, Prof. Matoanyika.
Yes, hello. Hello.
You made it.
I made it, yeah. Good morning, Andy. Good morning, Doc.
Greetings.
I was
Okay.
struggling, but I just made it.
You made it.
So, yes, I just made it, yeah. Thank you very much. All right. How are you, Doc Kada?
Prof, how are you?
Not too bad, thanks. And
Thanks, nice to see you. Yeah, although I'm not seeing you though.
You're not seeing me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you, but not seeing you.
All right. What do I need to do now? I go to the start video? No.
Oh.
Yes, Professor Joseph, you have to just click start video. Yeah, now we can see you, sir.
Now you can see me. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning, Professor Joseph.
Hi, that's Rahul. Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, sir. Good to see you.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Morning, Prof.
Right. Morning, how are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Right,
Okay,
yeah.
I see we're getting ready to start, so I will come out.
I'm just hoping our systems will be stable here. Hello.
Certainly.
Yeah.
We always live in hope.
Yes. They are perfect.
That's right.
Right
Yeah,
now.
that's right.
So,
yeah.
So I think they will be perfect for an hour.
Yeah. So I'll get my cue from Ropa, right?
Yes.
Certainly.
Yes.
All right. All right.
So Ropa is a very important person for today. So definitely we'll be all
I can
wait.
see that. I can see that. Now, yeah. All right. There you are.
Just for the next 90 minutes. Afterwards, then I revert to just being me.
All right.
So I think we should wait for another 1 minute. We will wait for another 1 minute or 2 minutes because we are seeing people are coming in. And then, they're joining.
That's
so
right.
we have almost 53 people right now. So let's wait for 2 minutes and then we can start.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Tell me, Ropa, you control the slides. How does it happen?
The slides will be controlled behind the scenes, Prof. So sit back.
So I'll give you a cue or not?
So, Prof,
all right.
Yeah, so I'll just tell you that the team, the Empower team is controlling the webinar PPT from behind. So whenever you need to just move on to the next slide, just say next slide, please. And then,
That's
people
right.
Good. Okay.
So this is for all the speakers to see that. Yeah.
That makes life. Yeah.
Certainly. Sit back and relax.
I just sit back and take.
Is Dr. Makondo with us?
He was.
Yes, he is.
Yes, I'm with you. I greeted you when you came in.
Hi, Edward. Kanjan.
Fine, and how are you?
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Not too bad, thanks. Yeah, no, I can see you. That's you for sure.
That's me, yes.
Right, yeah. All right. Okay. Right. Yeah. How are things up in the mountains, Andy? You've been in the mountain?
Yes, I'm high up in the mountains where we're having a lot of dengue fever this year because of high rainfall. So we're kept quite busy on mosquito control at the moment.
Oh,
okay. All right. Yeah.
Do you have the type of mosquitoes that are like those that are here?
Now we have a complete mix. We have 4 different types of mosquito here in a different. We have the Anopheles for the malaria. And we have the mosquitoes that transmit now this year for the first time in Thailand. We've got chikungunya as well as dengue and a little bit of Zika.
Yeah.
So mosquito control has suddenly become very strong. But Thailand elected not to take the dengue vaccine. So we're really into vector control in a big way.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I think we are ready to roll.
Yes, I think we should start. Yes, I think we should start now. Yeah. Over to you, Robert.
Welcome. Yes, thank you very much. Welcome to the lifelong learning in the era of COVID-19 with a special focus on the healthcare supply chain system. So I can say good morning for those that are still in the morning, good afternoon or good evening, since this is an international webinar.
Good morning to you.
Morning.
So basically, the flyers have gone out, and we really appreciate that we have a number of speakers with us today. The introductions will be made along the way, so sit back and relax.
Now I request Professor Andy to introduce Ms. Ropa.
Okay, I'm very pleased to introduce you, Mrs. Ropa Hove, who is a senior advisor at the Empower School of Health and has really helped us put together especially cultural content and especially with an Africa focus on activities that we're undertaking. She's a pharmaceutical policy and regulatory expert and is an accomplished speaker and trainer who has held leadership positions in national, regional, and international levels, especially in procurement and supply chain management, but also in pharmaceutical regulation, a very important area and an integral part of the supply chain. She is the past director of pharmacy services in the Ministry of Health in Zimbabwe. She is a pharmacist with a bachelor's honours degree from University of Zimbabwe, Master of Science in Pharmaceutical Services, and in conjunction with myself, also from the University of Bradford, where I studied many years ago as well. Diploma in Global Health Procurement and Supply Chain Management from the Empower School of Health, our premier qualification. So I'm most pleased that Mrs. Roper is with you today, and I hand back to her to follow on the slides now.
Thank you, Andy, for the warm and kind words. Now to housekeeping announcements. Kindly mute your mics and turn off the video. When you are not speaking, please ask questions using the chat box, or alternatively, you can raise your hand. Please participate in the polls. We are going to have 3 polls so that we know more about your interests. The webinar recordings will be available in the Empower School of Health YouTube channels, as well as the slide deck will be shared with all the participants. Please participate in the 3 polls so that we better engage. For the speakers, please turn on your camera for better engagement when you are presenting. And please mute your microphone when the other speaker is speaking, as well as I am seeking your indulgence, adhere to the webinar schedulings so that we are good stewards for the time that we have requested the participants to be with us this morning. The webinar objective is to understand the importance and role of lifelong learning in the era of COVID-19 with a special focus on the healthcare supply chain. Now we will be undertaking poll number 1. Please note that all our speakers, you will not be eligible to vote. This is only for the participants. This is a short poll with only 6 questions. I would encourage everyone to participate in the poll. What is the progress in the poll?
%51% of total participants have voted till now.
Thank you. That is more than half, more than 50%. Let me encourage everybody to participate in the poll. It is a very short poll. There is a question in the chat box, how to complete the poll. It is there on your gadget, whether you are using a phone or a laptop. You participate directly on the screen.
I can see people are voting. We have 20% of the votes done by now.
Good progress.
Yes, so I'll encourage everyone to just select the option, click on the side button, move your cursor down, and then submit the poll.
How many have completed now?
So it's 25% were voted by now. So we'll wait for some more time. I think it's the first time people are being engaged on a poll. And so we should give them all chance to learn this polling.
That's okay. That's okay.
So let them.
By the time we are doing the 3rd poll, they will be experienced.
Yes, yes, true. So I can see people are coming in also. So I'll request people to, yeah, so there are people who are voting. Slowly and slowly they are voting.
Okay.
That's good.
All right. We give them more time.
Yeah, I think we give them another 2 months time, 2 minutes time, because like people have now understood the process. I see a thanks from Jean. Thanks, it's our pleasure. I'm sure everybody is also doing the same. So slowly, I'll encourage the participants to please vote. It's very important for us to understand yourself so that the speakers can accordingly, talk more about the subject, from what age group you are, in which region you are, and which profession you are. So that's important for us to understand. So we've got 34%. Great. So it's now the number are increasing.
Yeah, that's good. Good progress.
We should get at least 50 to 60% vote to understand the audience.
We appreciate.
Yes.
After all, it's lifelong learning. So
yes,
we are learning how to complete the poll. You learn.
It's a new thing.
You learn every day.
Yeah. So now we have to learn all these things as after this post-pandemic era, the technological advances have to be learned. So another example of lifelong learning. So good.
Very much so. Very much so. We learn every day.
Yes. I hope people are voting. The vote 37% votes have already come in. I request another 10%. So some people to vote. Please vote. Please participate in the poll.
I think we should move on. The time is clicking over quite fast here, so we're on 7 minutes already.
I think that's fine. Now we can move on. So
okay, so let's have the results then.
Over to you,
so on the gender, we have more males at 59%. The age group 30 to 40 in the majority geographical region, majority from Zimbabwe at 48%. We also have the rest of Africa, and elsewhere it's 15%. Academic background, the majority are from pharmacy at 62.5%. Level of education, the majority 47% have the bachelor's degree. Where they work, private sector is the majority, 43.8%. Thank you very much. Let's proceed. Sonia, I note your hand is up.
No, I think we should proceed.
Okay, now briefly on the background of Empower School of Health. Empower is a capacity building organization which has worked in over 100 countries across multiple languages to strengthen institutional and human resources capacity of global health and humanitarian programs through digital learning interventions. So in terms of our reach, Empower has delivered nearly 1 million hours of capacity building content to nearly 200,000 public health professionals globally. And in the middle there, on the slide, you would see the focus area being 3 focus areas: leadership and change management, digital learning, as well as public health, procurement and supply chain. On the right, on my right on the slides, you would see that they are varied clients ranging from UN agencies, governments, professional associations, universities. Like for example, today we are having this joint webinar with a university, Anglican University in Zimbabwe. So the next slide is a demonstration graphically looking at where Empower is found globally across the world and indicating the various partners that Empower is collaborating with international NGOs, regulatory bodies, like for example, here in Zimbabwe, the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe, they have an MOU with MCAS, civil society organizations, industry associations, technical research institutes, as well as universities, like I've already said. This next slide, again, just expands in terms of the partners, the clients and funders of Empower School of Health, which, as you can see, they are very broad. Next slide. Regarding the advisors and faculty members, here are the men and women who are experts in their field in different parts of the world, which brings in a cultural flavor, an international flavor, a context. As you can see on the extreme right, the former the president of Ghana is a mentor to Empower School of Health. Next slide. In terms of the courses that are offered by Empower, we have the Global Health Procurement and Supply Chain Management Diploma, which is available in English and French. And there are a number of certificate courses which are also available, and these are available online in partnership with a number of professional associations. And just looking at our own local situation, the courses are being offered together. They have been approved for ongoing professional continuing development by the Pharmacy Council of Zimbabwe. Next slide. Now, can we undertake the poll number 2? We are now experienced, and this poll has fewer questions. It's only 4 questions. And with the experience that we have attained from poll number 1, I believe this one is going to be done in record time. And as I indicated earlier on, the slide deck will be provided, so you don't need to be taking notes furiously, as well as the certificate for attending this webinar will be sent to your emails. There is a link that will be provided in the chat box where you will then indicate your details so that the certificate can be emailed after the course. So be on the lookout for the link for completion of a form so that the certificate is emailed to you, as well as the slide deck. If for some reason you don't get the slide deck or the certificate, please feel free to reach out to Empower. They will then be able to send to you. The details will be made available where you can reach out to get the certificate and the slide deck in case you are not able to get the certificate and the slide deck for some reason. How are we doing for the poll, Rahul?
We are doing good. And another 10-15 seconds will be almost done. And then we can stop the poll. So another 10 seconds for everyone to finish off the poll, please.
Wonderful. They are quick learners.
Yeah, they are doing it very good now. So yeah, I think we can stop the poll now and show the results.
Okay, let's have the results then. On question number 1, on whether you have ever undertaken procurement supply chain, the majority have said yes, 45.9%. Training or education related to healthcare PSM, again, the majority, 49%, have undertaken courses. Do you have relevant training and knowledge to handle public health emergencies? 41% have said yes, 59% have not. So there are components. That is why we are having this seminar today. There are components on handling emergencies. At what level are you working in your organization? Mostly managers at 44.3%. Thank you very much. Let's proceed now. Let me introduce to you the first panelist, Professor Joseph Matwanyika. He is the acting Vice Chancellor for the Anglican University in Zimbabwe, a holder of a PhD in geography from the University of Waterloo. For 8 years, he was the director, Institute of Lifelong Learning and Development Studies at Chinhoyi University of Technology. For 6 years prior to that, he was the Chief Executive Officer of the Agricultural and Rural Development Authority, a major state enterprise in Zimbabwe. For 10 years, he coordinated a number of research and training programs for IUCN, which is the World Conservation Union, and the Food and Agricultural FAO regional offices of Southern Africa, and was director of Zero Regional Environment Organization of the Food and Agricultural Organization. Prior to that, he was the visiting research fellow with the Center for Applied Social Sciences from the University of Zimbabwe. Professor Matwanyika is an avid advocate for lifelong learning and development studies rooted in African cultural heritage context. Over to you, Professor Matwanyika.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and may I welcome everybody, the organizers, participants, and everyone on behalf of the Anglican University in Zimbabwe. Let me give you a brief background of the university itself and where it is coming from. The Anglicans, among other major churches in the world, have been responsible for education across the board for centuries now. And in Zimbabwe in particular, the Anglicans were the pioneers in terms of primary, secondary education in many ways from the 1890s. And it was in 2013 that the church resolved that it needed to set up a university, like other churches have done. And here we are. We are starting the process now of teaching, training, skills development, community skills development. I've given you a little bit of background on this slide here. The university expects to start a major construction in Marondera, which is in the east, about 75 kilometers east of Harare. Otherwise, we're starting in Harare itself, and we expect it to contribute to the development of 2 major hospitals in this country. For you who are aware of Zimbabwe, Bonda Hospital being one of them in the eastern part of the country, and another one in Gwelo. We've registered there. We're a member of the colleges and universities of the Anglican Communion, which puts together about 150 universities up and down the world, globally. And like I was mentioning to colleagues about close to 40 of them in India for historical reasons. Next slide, please. Can I have the next slide? We, as a church university, we are founded on a number of principles, which I present to you there. I will not go into it, but we derive largely from the principles and characteristics that drive the Anglican Church in Zimbabwe and beyond. In fact, these are global outlooks for the Anglican Communion in terms of our approach. Next slide, please. That's our vision, to project that Anglican family perspective, committed to living, preaching, and teaching the gospel, and engaged in holistic education guided by the Holy Spirit. I emphasize the point of holistic education, and that's where the issue comes off of lifelong learning. It is important to understand that from an African cultural perspective, holistic education is holistic. A very close perspective, perspective close to our thinking, is that we're always learning. We are born learning, and we keep learning. And in cultural terms, within our African context, we learn even beyond joining the ancestors and being with the Almighty. So lifelong learning is not simply just in the formal sense of learning that we're used to. Holistic education is particularly important, for us. Next slide, please. And in the process of projecting that learning, albeit at university level, but even within that university context, we are also going to offer skills training like we expect to do with Empower. We're starting now, and this webinar is the very beginning of that process. We took a very close attention to the issues of integral university education, and my colleague will speak to that. And the integral education requires that we identify societal problems, burning societal problems. And we have identified in the first instance the problems of disability and aging in our own societies. I'll give you the example of Zimbabwe. Statistics suggest that anything up to 2 million out of about 15, 16 million people have one form of disability or another. Those numbers increase when we look at aging as a major issue. We're not paying much attention to that even in our own education system, our own health systems, and so on and so forth. And that led us to then emphasize the issues of biomedical sciences and public health as part and parcel of the broader health and wellness disciplines. And this is where we are beginning the process of training, university training, research programs, biomedical sciences and public health in particular. And we expect it to run universities that have got the futuristic approach to it. And by the way, it is important, when we say futuristic, we do not take ourselves away from what has built us up to now, our cultural heritage. In our own environment, we are going to be incorporating our own thinking in looking particularly at how we've survived over the millennia as a people from a health perspective and a public health perspective. For most of our countries in Africa, you recognize that traditional medicines are particularly important. How to then get them into organized public health systems, organized by medical sciences, is going to be a very important issue for us. Because after all, that's where the health and wellness of the bulk of the population, derives. And it is important that we look at that. We expect to set up a state-of-the-art university teaching hospital. And by state-of-the-art, we're not necessarily taking that university away from the issues I've just mentioned of our backgrounds in terms of cultural heritage. Health matters, a strongly cultural matter, all the time, all the way through. And we need to emphasize the issue of curative systems and health systems. And for that reason, we have a gamut of program, degree programs that you're proposing. Can I have the next slide, please? With that in mind, we have identified 4 major disciplines. First one being food and environment. And within that, we are setting up a faculty of food and environmental studies. And please take note, if you look at the proposed degree programs, they may look usual. They're unique in many ways. If you look at the Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems program, and you go back to health and public health issues, our food systems are sick in many ways. That's the way we see things, from the Anglican University in Zimbabwe. So we would like to promote not simply just advanced agricultural processes, but advanced food systems that derive very largely from what people know, what people have used, and will continue to experiment with and use. And that's why we are going to promote health. In the health and welfare and wellness discipline, we propose a number of degree programs, as you can see in there. Biomedical sciences, biomedical engineering, issues like biomedical engineering in particular, we think are particularly important, for us, because we think we, as nations, in fact, in many of our countries, we are behind with that. Often enough, we have a lot of equipment, with a lot of information that is not particularly used because we have not contextualized it within our own context. Issues of bioinformatics, biotechnology, forensics, sports medicine. I've mentioned to people anywhere in any part of our countries right now, as we speak, especially in this morning, you have millions of children running up and down, school grounds and so on and so forth. We're doing very little with respect to training, in preparing them for, in preparing our own experts in looking at issues regarding sports medicine in that regard. And from this medicine and so on, we propose other faculties: public health and rehabilitation sciences, community and social work. I'll go back to the community and social work issues and look at a particular emphasis that we need to place. Look at child and family studies. If we do not, this is our thinking, particularly have almost all our experts, not just in these areas, but in all other areas in our society, to pay attention to child and family study issues, we are detracting from the importance of health. We are detracting from the wholeness and health, welfare of our populations. So we're going to be paying attention to that. The same as you look at issues like ethics, philosophy, and religious studies. We're not simply just talking about purely theological studies. We are placing this within the context of issues like ethics. Several of our problems have got massive problems with respect to systems that just are not going right, that do not serve the interests of the public. And many of the issues derive all the way back to the kind of ethics that we're developing, that we have thrown away. And that leads to the next issue. If you look at the bottom there in terms of business studies, we're expecting to start a degrees program early next year on business and ethics, for example. But in that school, we're starting a supply chain and logistics and humanitarian logistics degree program, which is advanced in its preparation within the next 3 months. And we expect it to then include issues like ethics and all these other, various studies. But holistic education to issues for the university is particularly important. So we're proposing 7 faculty university there. We're starting with the 1 or 2 within the next few months, driven by the kind of experience we're having now, exposures to ideas from Empower, from other schools. I won't mention those, or maybe we can talk to those, speak to those as we ask questions. The next slide, please. And we also envisage setting up 13 centers that will promote graduate studies and research. But in particular, the first one, which effectively is running the programs that we are setting up with the Empower, we are putting forward a Center for Lifelong Learning, the principles of which my colleague will speak to, in much greater, for community skills development. We have to find the modus operandi of making sure that our lifelong learning is culturally sensitive, is culturally placed within our African environment. This is the only way, in our view, that we are going to promote the Christian ethics and Christian principles we're talking about, and the future of our own populations. Because these derive also from long-term historical perspectives that see our approach. We are very Christian, countries in most of Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. It's not a fluke. It derives from 2,000 years of exposure to Christian principles, and not just the last 500 years. And these are issues that we think should now begin to get incorporated into how we approach public health issues, how we approach biomedical sciences, how we approach other issues. And we're developing modules already developed, in fact, on lifelong learning beyond what we looking at in this webinar for community skills development in particular. We don't think we want to leave it at the level for extremely elitist kind of training. No, we would like to have it as user-friendly to as many people as possible. For an example, by the time we set up our university and community teaching hospitals, we expected to ingrain within the training ordinary people from the villages, who some would call community health workers, as part and parcel of for the extension of our health systems, and so on. So that lifelong learning comes in, not just for certificated outcomes in terms of formal degrees or formal diplomas or formal certificates. My colleague will speak to that, Dr. Kada, a little bit later on. Can we have the next slide, please? And our work for 2021, I already mentioned the degree in supply chain management and humanitarian logistics. We are emphasizing the issue of humanitarian logistics. I think everyone agrees that the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has shown globally, universally, glaring gaps in our supply chain systems. And it's one of the reasons why we're then wanting to emphasize, especially and speak to issues on humanitarian logistics, the work of NGOs, the work of aid, programs, disaster management, situation, and supply chain systems that come into that. Even though we'll then be looking at the health side of issues, but there is all these complicated interstices that we must address in seeing why it is that such an advanced world in global terms finds itself so much lacking when it comes to supply chain system in health matters, when we've got a life-threatening situation like the pandemic. These are issues that we expect to integrate in our undergraduate training and research. And we are then preparing for a degree in business and ethics. And we expect in January next year to set up a degree in counseling in family health, like already stated. Our counseling in particular needs to be so culturally centered and so culturally placed in our own system. The CAT, which is General University of Technology, because these degree programs in the immediate term we are putting forward as part of on an affiliate status with the Chino University of Technology, who we're partnered up with. We're partnering up with Empower, we're partnering up with the other institutions so that, we put forward solid, programs, both at certificate and diploma levels and also at the graduate, level. Number 5 is the Empower certificate courses and diplomas. We'll speak to those later on. The whole purpose of this webinar is to launch that process of getting into those certificate courses. And we expect later on in the year to start a diploma and at a very practical level. We have a farm on which we are going to develop the main campus of the university in the Marondera city, which, like I said, 75 kilometers east of Harare. We have a farm, more than 200 hectares. We have started, some horticultural production. We are engaging youth into a greenhouse, vegetable production, horticulture, production. Again, with the ethos of what we're talking about of learning, lifelong learning, and the experience, and also instilling in some of our young people some of the values that we think are essential for us to take ourselves forward as a nation, as a society. The next slide, please. Our big dream: we cannot build a 21st university based on 19th century principles. We must build the AUZ for the 22nd century. This is particularly important. We are going to speak to this. Pedagogically, we all know that we derive our university education largely from what took place in the 19th century. And this is global in many ways. And again, my colleague will speak to this with respect to integral education. We have to begin to unravel. We've got the opportunity to do so as a new enterprise, as a new university. We are seeking resources, for this, to move us forward. So we must leave a 22nd century legacy, not just a 21st century legacy. We are aware that we're some 80 years from the 22nd century, but it's now that we are, putting in the roots, for this. It has taken us a good 5 years to get to where we are right now, because we've been thinking very carefully on the way forward. But we remain firmly rooted in African societal values. Africa is the future of humanity. Everyone is accepted that. Just like it is its long-term past. We all derive from Africa globally. And we must then begin to place Africa at the center of the future of humanity. As a church-led institution, we expect that will proceed. Will succeed and prosper. And the next slide, please. No, I think let's leave that. I think there's another one. This one we'll use later. Right? This is our motto. You'll see right at the beginning you had the in our logo the Latin word for this apud deum possibilia. With God, all things are possible. That is the university motto. We've been taken by the Almighty to get where we are today in this webinar. And as we look forward to registering and starting some of the certificates with Empower, we're expecting to be joined by a number of you and others as you spread the word with respect, to us taking forward the possibility and the possibilities that the Almighty always gives to us in solving problems, in making sure that humanity extends into the future. And thank you very much for allowing me to give you this brief to the thinking and the principles and the visions and visioning that we are undertaking in the Anglican University in Zimbabwe. Join us from all over Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for setting the tone. And as we proceed now to the next panelist, let me introduce Dr. Stephen Kada, who is the chairperson of the Academic Programming Committee in the Anglican University in Zimbabwe. He's a corporate retired highly experienced practical human resources consultant, strategist, and catalyst. He has worked in the fields of education, social work, management in private, public, and civic sectors. He holds a PhD in transformation management from Da Vinci Institute of Technology in South Africa, as well as a master's degree in transformation management, University of Buckingham in the United Kingdom. Over to you, Dr. Kada, and can I seek your indulgence to stick to the allocated time?
I'm unmuting and I'm putting on my video. Right, can you see me? Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can see you. We can see you and we can hear you, Dr. Kada. Please go ahead.
Great, great, wonderful. Thank you very much for giving me this time, this opportunity to really go into the Anglican University, and in particular, stressing the point that it is a unique university in that it is integral. Hence, it's called an integral Anglican Integral University in Zimbabwe. I would like to call it. As the professor said, we go back a number of decades as an Anglican church to give education and missionary work in Zimbabwe. And the two-pronged approach really worked together for quite a long time to produce the products that we have produced in Zimbabwe as an Anglican in terms of intellectuals, in terms of missionary workers. However, the Anglican Church came in, as you know, as one of the colonial churches that came into Africa. And obviously they brought with them a philosophy, a Western philosophy, or a Northern and Western philosophy of missionary work as well as education. Hence, the bias that we find in the Zimbabwean education, which is very European, which is very American. As a result, we have the successes and failures that we face today from this kind of education. This sort of education stems from a philosophy, the liberal philosophy of education, which really emphasized, which put at the pinnacle the issue of reasoning. The principal thing was reasoning, and also believed in an education that was more scientific. In other words, science led the day. And usually we discovered that we have an education which is elbowed out the other parts. It's culturally designed to elbow out things like the spirit, the soul. And it, because of the bias, we tend not to find the African philosophy in the education, the philosophy of humanism. Any university is based on philosophies. Therefore, you pardon me if I go into these philosophies for a while. The philosophy, the Western philosophy was rational thinking, the power of reasoning, whereas the African based his philosophy on humanism. In other words, the family is the key, the relationships, it's relational. And when you go to the further east, our colleagues, they believe in holism. In other words, they believe in the wholeness of a human being, his physical body and his soul. And when you get to the north itself, the pinnacle at the top is the man and his reasoning power. So everything else falls short. And now here we are talking about those three philosophies, but we have got the fourth one, which I think we are addressing today, lifelong learning, based on the issue that a human being is total. He is both body and soul, and culture comes into play, and therefore we have this background and resulting in the imaging of the reasoning that we need a more integral approach, an approach that takes all those philosophies together, an integral approach, and leading us to the integral university, unique in itself in that it is encompassing, and the ultimate goal, obviously, comes in the final analysis of what we are calling here today, lifelong learning university. I'll go into that in detail. So the expected contributions from that kind of university is would get sustainable development and instill humanitarian values, and we want to develop people who are accountable and responsible. We cannot do it without a holistic approach, like the professor said, holistic education, not based on one type of philosophy. And to effectively address spiritual issues, that two-pronged approach of the church and education, so that we get a balanced human being, to integrate learners with their communities, organizations, society, and to mold people who are able to face challenges in society. Next slide. I've just explained in this slide here that we got our education system from either Oxford or from Harvard or from Cambridge, and all we did was emphasize the theoretical and the intellectual approaches to education, and emphasizing science, experiments. And usually our experience has been that most of our graduates, from master's degree to PhD, all they emphasize is recommendations in their thesis. They recommend and recommend and recommend, and we wonder who is going to then apply all those recommendations in future. And the answer lies mainly in lifelong learning concept of university. Next slide. Therefore, we have this an emerging integral university, which I've just explained, which focus on integrated individual organization, integrates both intellectual and physical activities, and promotes an ecosystem of research. This, I want to emphasize this, an ecosystem of research, knowledge creation, and innovation. The Western cultural bias of education, as a kind of a critique here, emphasizes mainly individual excellence, intellectual excellence, and it also emphasizes a research that mainly researches on people, not research with people. People become objects of research. People do not become an integral part of research. So our PhDs go and give their demonstrations and give their oral demonstrations to their supervisors, to their administrators, but the people that have been researched upon usually are left out. They don't come into the picture at all. So our knowledge emphasizes social distribution, application-oriented, and transdisciplinary in essence. We have tended to produce technicians, doctors. We have tended to produce engineers without a soul. But universities that are attempting to do that, I've just put them below there. There's Da Vinci Institute, there's Gaia University in UK, there's Salvador, and there's Indianapolis in Egypt. They're trying to put the human element, the human thing into our university so that we are integral. Next slide. So the purpose, obviously, is being a universal transformative higher learning institute that incorporates the four things: intellectual, practical learning, knowledge creation, and innovation. The question of innovation arises in that today, innovation is centered on technological innovation at the expense of the social innovation. Hence, we have a society that is driven by technology, but a society that does not drive technology. And it's upside down, and therefore, behaviors we get from our engineers, from our doctors, from our teachers, you find that it is because technology is driving them most of the time. So we need certain values, like I've just put across there. We need normative values that are concerned with restoring life in nature and community. Hence, you find that the doctor has been emphasizing the medical side of our university and the health and the aging, because that is one of our values as an integral university. And we believe in the renewal, conscientizing, raising consciousness, and have a core evolution in culture and spirituality. We need that core evolution. We need to grow both physical and spiritual. When we get new knowledge from speculation, from either introspection by individual organizations and society, we need to have a renewal. We need to fuse that knowledge. And when you fuse that knowledge, you come up with a new knowledge. The problem is the dominance of Western science, which has been handed down from west to the south. And from the south, I'm talking of the south of Africa. Africa just provides the data, the raw material, and the West produces the theories. No theories have come from Africa, because all our universities, all they do is forward what they have collected as data to Europe, and we get theories from Europe. But I can go on with this one and demonstrate the disadvantages of the research that we carry out. I was fascinated and surprised that the president of South Africa has eventually, maybe by his own conscience or by advice, that we are going to have a kind of research in South Africa that is going to produce our own vaccine in Africa. Because all we did was get all the information to Europe, and then the vaccines are made in Europe. And now we are running short of vaccines, COVID vaccines, because we cannot make them. And I'm pleased we are moving in the right direction. We need that renewal. And also, I move on to say we need an open and transparent knowledge creation. And we need an open society. And in my last value, the realization, this is where we are joining Empower, so that we have self-realization, organizational realization, community realization, and societal realization. And this can only come if we start rebuilding the infrastructure and the institutions through our learning institutions. These are the laboratories that we need. Right. Thank you for the next slide. I can see
apologies, Dr. Kada. I know you are passionate. I know you are passionate about the area, but regrettably, we are running out of time. Can you be winding up, please?
Definitely, I am. Thank you. We do that through catalyzation and activation. Next slide. Next slide. And also do research and education. Hence, AUZ works through its Center for Lifelong Learning in undertaking certified outcomes at different levels. Next. Hence, we have these 4 universities. We have community serve, which is community based. In other words, the communities gets involved in the research as well. We have got the developmental university where we, these are concepts in the university, where we have the conscientization of the community and the organization and the people. And we also emphasize research is very important. Hence, we have the research university concept. And we get all these from our, if you notice the structure of our education disciplines is based on nature and community, culture and spirituality, science, systems and technology, enterprise and economics, religion and humanity. Next. Next slide. We expect to contribute sustainable development through the transformation and development of individuals, community, organization, society. Also contributing towards addressing societal burning issues. The university emphasizes that all disciplines, all programs for students will not just be picked from the notice board, but that students have to come up with specific issues to address in their community. And the 3, we are talking about peaceful co-evolution and open society. The knowledge is quite open, not only to remain at the pinnacle and ivory tower of the universities, but also to go to the ground, to the organizations and the communities and our society. We also contribute to the academic body of knowledge through integral research and transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kada. I know you are passionate
Thank you,
about
Ropa.
this.
Thank you, Ropa.
I know you are passionate. I apologize for having to
No, don't
interrupt
worry.
you there. Let's proceed now to the next panelist. Let me introduce Professor Andy Barakla. He's the Professor of Public Health and he's the Director of Training at the Empower School of Health. He's a co-author of the famous Yellow Book, Managing Drug Supplies. He has vast experience working with major international funding institutions. And he also has a part of his history in Zimbabwe, where he undertook donor-funded activities in the provision of family planning commodities and the responses to the early onset of HIV in the 1990s. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you very much. We're running a little late, so I'm afraid I'm going to talk rather fast and go through the slides quickly, but you will get the slide deck. There are lots of links for information if you want to know more. Next slide, please. I'm sure everyone at the Anglican University in Zimbabwe already knows about lifelong learning. After all, it's one of the foundation principles of the university. Unfortunately, in the wider world, the concept is not always so well established. We see in Ethiopia, 50% of community pharmacists don't know about continuing professional development. In Malawi, Tanzania, South Africa, nurses and midwives not happy with the CPD and the quality they're receiving in that one. So although it's a long established concept, surprisingly, it's not always so well known. Next slide, please. At the Empower School of Health, lifelong learning is also one of our core principles since our foundation. We approach this as continuous digital learning, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about that as we go along, and we do that by establishing communities of practice. That is, we get everyone working in the field to share their knowledge and experience together with everyone. We encourage all our alumni graduates to continue with us and share their knowledge all the time. And it's through this community of practice that we bring lifelong learning. Next slide, please. Well, what's the impact of COVID-19 on this? The World Health Organization has been in existence for 73 years. It's even older than me. But only this year, only 70 years later, have they decided they need to establish a lifelong learning center. That's the realization that COVID has brought to lifelong learning. Now we understand that we really must do this. COVID has exposed our great weaknesses and our great need to be able to learn and learn quickly. We see across the whole healthcare sector, pharmacists and dentists and public health and nursing all now want more lifelong learning. Now it's all at the forefront of the operation, which it's not been for many years. Next slide, please. What is the impact of COVID-19, particularly on the supply chain? I wonder how many of you had ever heard of Wuhan before January 2020. Could you have ever found it on a map? The center of the first discovery of the COVID-19 virus. But Wuhan is much more than that. Wuhan is also the manufacturing center for around 40 active pharmaceutical ingredients. That is the key ingredient that goes into the medicine. Most people think that their medicine comes from India. India is known as the pharmacy of the world. And yes, India produces many low-cost, generic, finished medicines. But it gets the active pharmaceutical ingredient to produce those medicines from China. 70% of the API comes from China, and just where in China? Right in Wuhan. So when Wuhan went into lockdown in Hubei province, suddenly there's no API to make the medicine. And that's had a huge impact. So now we have to try and mitigate the effects of this huge disruption to the supply chain for medicines and health products. Next slide, please. If we look at the impact on pharmaceutical manufacturing, we take a large donor organization like the Global Fund. They are saying around a quarter of their orders are facing delays of 30 days. Even oral contraceptives are out of stock because this Wuhan lockdown affects strange things, not just the factories. But what about the companies that print the labels that go on the bottles? They're in lockdown. What about people getting to work? They can't get to work in the lockdown. It goes on a massive impact across the essential medicine world. Next slide, please. If we look at the Global Fund forecast for the available of key medicines for HIV, TB, and malaria, we see in the middle of last year, June, they were in the high risk of stockouts. Now they're towards the medium risk, but just over the last few months, HIV medicines are entering the high risk again. But if we look at the target for 2023, the target for Africa is only 15% of countries to be out of stock. How can I explain to a TB patient or an ARV patient that we don't have the medicines for you? Only 15% is the target. This is the difficulty, this is the situation that we face in supply chain. Next slide, please. So why do we need this lifelong learning, especially for supply chain, to learn how to mitigate the impacts? We've not had a disruption like this before. 15 years ago, the majority of our medicines came from Europe. They were long established and robust supply chains with multiple manufacturers. That's changed. The majority of our medicines are now generic suppliers from India. There's a large number of manufacturers, but there's only one or two sources in the world of the API. Our supply chain has become very fragile. And learning how to address that is a whole new technology, a whole new world of activity. We don't do it on annual tender analysis. We have to learn new skills to address those shortages. And those shortages are being seen across Africa. Next slide, please. If we look on the left, these are reports from central medical stores in Africa of shortages. Top of the list is morphine. Of course, because of COVID, great pain, trying to do pain management and relief. But even entirely unrelated items, nothing to do with COVID, are in short supply because of the lockdowns and the disruptions to pharmaceutical manufacturing. On the right is the forecast of which items are expected to be in short supply. And you can see, again, entirely unrelated items like vitamin A to be in short supply. How are we going to cope? We have to learn new skills of mitigation. And that's part of lifelong learning. Next slide, please. But what does it mean? Because of COVID and in life generally, we all learn new skills. They're not always formal courses. We don't always get a certificate for learning how to use a ventilator or the different types of oxygen that we need to connect together. But we learn that skill. We have to try and recognize those skill developments and bring them into a lifelong learning platform that recognizes not just academic achievements, but skill learning as well. But everyone now talks about digital learning, but in fact we see it's not all that effective. There's a very high dropout rate on digital courses. If we're going to use digital, how can we make it effective? And finally, if we look at what COVID has taught us, 40% of our skills are going to be obsolete in the next 10 years. Means we have to get 4% new skills every year just to stay current. That's the importance and the impact of COVID on lifelong learning. It always was important. Now it's even more important. Next slide, please. How are you going to learn 40% new skills? What does it mean? It means you're going to have to study at an average rate of around 1 to 2 hours per week on lifelong learning. But most health professional continuing professional development, CPD programs, are currently only around 30 minutes per week. So you're going to have to look at 2 to 4 times more lifelong learning involvement. Next slide, please. Well, everybody wants this new lifelong learning. Suddenly it's the big fashion, we must have it. But who's going to pay for it? The donors, the big traditional donors, have already failed to fund the Sustainable Development Goals for learning. It's not happened. The SDG money is not there, and we're not achieving those educational goals because of the lack of funding. We cannot expect international donors to fund. The reality is that you, as a healthcare professional, as a supply chain professional, are going to have to pay. And that means development of free and low-cost lifelong learning platforms. Where are the resources for this lifelong learning? Where's all the teachers? Where's all the white-haired old professors who are going to do it? How are we going to deliver this? They're not there, and they're not going to be there. The reality is we're going to have to learn from ourselves, skill and knowledge transfer. In Power, we build on our alumni database to bring that along, and we're recommending that for all educational establishments. Next slide, please. In Power, we have a mentoring program. We're very fortunate to have the former president of Ghana as one of our mentors. We have a whole chain of different people that can help mentor people on a one-to-one basis. When you have a problem, you don't have to talk to the computer. You don't have to talk to the machine. You can talk to a real live person who can help you learn. Next slide, please. We have a massive alumni network, over 10,000 people. When we started our supply chain courses, we estimated we would need to train 30,000 people. Because of the expansion in supply chain, the expansion in all the different activities, we still need to train 30,000 more. But we have 10,000 now. We can draw on, we can use their skills, we can give of their time to you to learn. Next slide, please. Can the alumni be teachers? You graduate and now you're a teacher? No, it doesn't work like that. Firstly, we don't want chalk and talk didactic style. That's the domain of academic educational establishments. What we want is knowledge and skill sharing. That's the point of lifelong learning. Digital learning is a skill. Putting a few slides on YouTube is not digital learning. And too many people somehow feel that that's all there is to it. All I have to do is a little PowerPoint, put it on YouTube and I'm finished. That's not it. You have to learn the skills, both of receiving digital learning, how to get the most from it, and how to provide digital learning. And that's a skill that everyone's going to have to learn as we give of our time to move forward on lifelong learning. Next slide, please. How can we make this digital learning work then? We use a technique called blended learning. Face-to-face learning doesn't mean you have to sit together in the coffee shop. We can do it on Zoom meetings, but it's still one-to-one, personal, direct contact. So that we explain when you get stuck, when you hit a problem, often just a few words from someone who does the job every day can make it happen. Of course, web-based learning, a key feature. Micro-learning, We send you a little note every day on your mobile phone, just like you might receive prayer for the day or scripture for the day. We're going to send you supply chain thought for the day. Every day, a little key on micro learning. Virtual labs where you can try out what if scenarios. What if I build a bigger warehouse? Will that really help? What if I buy 4 more trucks? Will that help the transport? Try it out in the lab. Adaptive assessments, so you can measure yourself. How well are you learning? Not academically, but on a skills-based method. And finally, gamification, playing games. Next slide, please. Well, does this playing games, is this really a way to learn? On its own, no, it doesn't work. But as part of a blended learning system, if it's incorporated and well designed, it can help you to learn. On its own, never. Playing Space Invaders at home is not going to help you to learn supply chain. But playing games on what happens if I increase the number of trucks, what happens if I increase warehouse space, can give useful feedback. It needs good design, and it needs to be understanding of the disadvantages that come with gamification, only as part of a blended learning program. Next slide, please. Empower has formulated what we call the big learning platform. It's got 4 major components to help lifelong learning. Zimbabwe already has a partial first component, and that is the digital health repository. It's there where the major policies and documents are kept. We call that the knowledge cube. We establish in country a server where all the knowledge is kept. That's part 1. Next slide, please. We then go through the 4 parts, the knowledge cube, the learning and development platform. When you decide, I need to know more about, that's the learning platform. And that will guide you in how to learn, how to speak with mentors, how to get courses, how to get skill sharing. We then have the technical assistance platform. What to do when you don't understand. I'm trying to do these complex economic order quantities. It's the square root of a binomial chain. I don't understand how to do that. We have the technical assistance platform to help and guide you through. Finally, the peer-to-peer ecosystem, the mentoring, one-to-one, to help you get through that learning curve. Next slide, please. On their own, these parts are useful, but combined together, they provide a complete solution for lifelong learning. Next slide, please. The main features is it can handle it. It can be multilingual, it's online, it's accessible, but you still talk to real people. It's not run by computers. The computers are a tool. Just like you might use a stand light to help you read a book. The light won't help you read the book, it's a tool to help you. The computer is a tool to help you access the information. And real people are available throughout to assist. Next slide, please. There's a link here to a video which explains it more, and on the screen are examples of the big learning platform, which is throughout. It's country specific, it's in your particular languages, it's for your operational systems. And it's customizable for you personally, the information that you want to receive, the updates that you want to have. Next slide, please. Finally, if you're interested in COVID-19 and supply chain, there is available free of charge online courses that we offered for GOAN, the Global Outbreak Alert Response Network, in all aspects of supply chain for COVID-19, from vaccine management all the way through to waste management of pharmaceuticals. Thank you very much. I'm sorry it's a little rushed, and I hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Andy, for the comprehensive presentation that you had to rush through. Let me reassure the participants that the presentations will be sent to your emails, and remind you that if you have any questions, please include them in the chat box indicating which presenter you would want to address that particular question. We are running behind time. May I seek your indulgence for us to then go through the next presentation? We only are now left with the question and answer, as well as launching the scholarship. So seeking your indulgence. Can I present the last speaker, who is Dr. Edward Makondo, who is a counselor and a member of the academic programming committee of the Anglican University in Zimbabwe. He's a former deputy director in the Ministry of Health and Child Care, nursing training and administration. He has more than 30 years experience in nursing education, and for many years he was an external examiner for a number of universities, including UNISA, Zimbabwe Open University, as well as Africa University. He holds a PhD in literature and philosophy from the University of South Africa, as well as a master's degree in adult education from the University of Zimbabwe. Over to you, Dr. Makondo. Reminding you of the time limitations that we have.
Thank you, Ropa. Right, the title of the presentation is Supply Chain Management, Lifelong Learning for Optimal Healthcare Delivery. Next slide, please. The areas of concern here are the level of stockouts and high expiries. In relation to the levels of stockouts, Professor has just talked something about that. Also, there is the issue of the cost of running the supply chain, which are very high. Then there is also data feasibility is poor across the supply chain. Next slide, please. Right, the supply chain definitions. In actual fact, as far as supply chain definitions are concerned, we've got the movement of goods from the manufacturers, and this then involves the transportation, the storage, and then the finished goods to the point of service delivery. Next slide, please. Looking at this diagram here, if we start from the manufacturers, we find that from manufacturers, they actually need good manufacturing practices, which means they have to follow standards when they are doing manufacturing. And also the lead times are very important because everything has to go according to time. If goods are not manufactured in good time, it means we're going to be having shortages. Then we move on to the area of procurement. In the Ministry of Health and Child Welfare, there are procurement policies and procedures. These policies and procedures are there to ensure that the whole system is actually transparent. Then we come on to then the storage, the storage and distribution. At this level, that's when we have the distribution. This goes on to service delivery to the point where the goods are now used on the clients. Also important, in Zimbabwe, we have the essential drug list. This essential drug list gives the health professionals guidelines on prescribing medicines for certain conditions. And then we've got our regulatory frameworks, which have been talked about before. We've got the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe, which ensures that all medicines which come into the country are safe for people to be able to use them. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. On this slide, I'll give the example of vaccines, for instance. Where vaccines are made by the manufacturers, they have to maintain a certain temperature throughout. Supposing if we have a vaccine which has to be stored at temperatures of -2 degrees centigrade to 8 degrees centigrade, this has to be maintained throughout the transport system. And even if it's being airlisted, these temperatures have got to be maintained even during the time when they are being transported from one place to another. Again, the temperatures, those temperatures must be maintained. Then when they come on to the point of distribution, initially they can come to our central stores. Vaccines will be stored there. From the central stores, then they can go on to the provincial stores, the district stores. But throughout that temperature, if it's -2 degrees centigrade to 8, it has to be maintained throughout. When it comes now to the point where the vaccines are supposed to be delivered, let's say at a hospital situation, the refrigerators where the vaccines are kept, they ensure that the temperatures are maintained. In hospitals, nurses will have to make sure that morning and evening, they make recordings of the temperatures of the refrigerators to ensure that the temperatures of, if it is -2 to 8 degrees centigrade, it is maintained, and they sign their signature to make sure that that has been done. If there is, for instance, outreach vaccination in a tent also, then nurses will have to carry cooler boxes. And the cooler boxes, again, are supposed to maintain those vaccines on those temperatures, -2 to 8, but the temperatures vary from vaccine to vaccine. Next slide, please. As has been said before, procuring agents and warehouses, this can be in a different country. For instance, here we can use an example of Denmark. Then we've got our active pharmaceutical ingredients in China. Then the manufacture of the product in India. For instance, when it comes to vaccines, India is one of the countries in the world where they have massive vaccine production. Then from the manufacturer, then you come on to the end user, the process which I've actually explained before. Next slide, please. Right, what is important in the whole process of supply chain management? People are very important in this because you need skilled people to be able to participate in supply chain management. They need training, and you need standards. You need a process where you have the standards and management processes so that the whole process goes on very well. And then the management practices must be approved management practices so that we maintain quality. Then as far as performance is concerned, you need standard performance where the processes and strategies are maintained. Next slide, please. Right, now we come on to the levels of care in the Ministry of Health. For instance, in Zimbabwe, in our rural provinces, if we started at primary level, this is where we find our rural health centers, our clinics, and this is the first level where people in the rural areas go to seek treatment. Should they need some referral, they are then referred to a secondary level. In this case, in rural Zimbabwe, the secondary level will be a district hospital. At the district hospital, if they then find that they have patients who need more care than what they have, a more specialized place, then they go to a tertiary level. The tertiary level here in Zimbabwe are provincial hospitals. At the moment in Zimbabwe, we've got 7 provincial hospitals altogether. Then from the provincial, should they need highly specialized treatment, they then go to the quaternary level. The quaternary level are the central hospitals in Zimbabwe. And in Zimbabwe, we've got 6 central hospitals. This is where we get our specialists. But to support our specialists, what is really needed is they need adequate resources in order to perform their work. The problem which we have in most of the towns is that from the primary level, we do not have equivalent of secondary level and tertiary level, which means you might find a person, like for instance, in Harare, they might be referred from a city health clinic to actually the central level because we lack district hospitals in most of our towns. What is really needed is more district hospitals in most of our towns because when it's like this, there is a lot of congestion at the quaternary level. People who are seeking treatment at the quaternary level are really supposed to be cared for lower down. So to solve this, it's a matter of having these levels in between. Then as far as our municipal local authorities are concerned, they have urban clinics, which are at primary level. And we've also got the church-related organizations. In the rural areas, we've got some missions in Zimbabwe, which actually act as our district hospital, and they are contributing quite a lot as far as the delivery of healthcare in Zimbabwe is concerned. Then we also have the issue of the private sector, where we have the general practitioners and mines for the general practitioners and hospitals. We also have mines taking place. For instance, we've got Wange Colliery. Wange Colliery actually is a private hospital. This also participates in the training of nurses, and they provide care to complement the health systems of the country. Then we've got also the retail pharmacies. These play an important part in terms of provisions of medicines within the country. Next slide, please. Right, if we look at the whole system of supply chain in Zimbabwe, we've got our supplier, which we've earlier on talked about. And then in Zimbabwe, we also got NatFarm, which is a major storage for our medicines in Zimbabwe. And from here, the medicines can then be distributed now to the health facilities in Zimbabwe. Obviously, this requires transportation, it requires a lot of organization, it requires a lot of experience. Next slide, please. We've got complexities in the supply chain. Some of them are huge, a fragmentation of procurement and distribution. This has already been mentioned earlier on before. Then there is also the formation of silos in the system. There is poor stock management at the periphery due to silos. In fact, in terms of stock, the management of stock is a crucial area which people in the health professionals really require training in this so that the system moves efficiently. There is also insufficient systems in place, lack of coordination of supply chain actors. This is necessary in order for this to be done very well. There is increased burden on particularly the peripheries. Then we've got the problems of expiries. The problem of expiries, especially of medication, is a major problem in Zimbabwe. One of the reasons why this is so, I think, is because we do not have computerization. If we had computerization, we can actually avoid loss of a lot of medication before they expire. Because if there was computerization and you've got somebody at central level who is monitoring the whole situation, they will be able to move medicines before they expire from where they are in abundance to where they are needed. Whilst we've got guidelines in place, sometimes they are not always followed. For instance, there are guidelines that if somebody is working, let's say at a district hospital, and they find that the medicines they have, they are not going to be able to use them in the next 6 months, they are supposed then to move them to the next level, which will be the provincial level. At provincial level, then they can redistribute. But sometimes people will just hoard medications and they will not check the expiry date. They may not be aware of their rate of consumption to be able to estimate when these are going to be used or not, whether they are going to be used or not. And sometimes they may not also be checking on expiry dates. They just find them expired. So it's an area really which needs a lot of training. Next slide, please. Right, most of this, I think it has been talked, we've talked about most of this as far as the supply chain is concerned. For instance, what is really required, as we emphasized earlier on, the human resources is very important, human resources, because they need training, they need to know, you need people who know what they're doing. Then information management is very important. We've talked about issues where things will expire without people being aware. Then there can also be the issue of financing. Very often, sometimes there are shortages because funds are inadequate. But it's very sad when there are inadequate funds, and then you at the same time see medication which expire. All this also requires supervision. You need supervisors who, when they go around to inspect their institutions, or even those within the institutions, they should be able to go through and look at the stock levels in their departments and be able to discuss with the people who are at the level of point delivery to see what is it that they're going to use, and also to be able to alert what is it that is going to be in short supply, rather than just waking up in the morning and say, oh, by the way, we don't have this drug, we don't have this drug. And yet they keep records of patients, especially those on chronic diseases. We've got registers for patients on chronic diseases. So it's easy to be able to estimate, to see how much are you going to be needing. But very often this data which is collected may not be used to the maximum. Next slide, please. Then in the supply chain, there are diverse professionals. For instance, the pharmacists, when it comes to medication, they are very important pharmacists. They are the ones who assist in the management of medications within the country. Then we've got also the nurses. The nurses are at the point of service delivery. They are the ones who actually administer the medications. They are the ones who are supposed to be watching out for the stocks, for the expiry dates. Then we've got also skilled people like in the laboratories. They participate in the investigations. We've also got high investment in commodities, which requires a skill. And all this requires actually training for the people to be able to do it properly. Or for them to be able to do quantification, they need to be trained in this. Then the issue of storage space, it must be there. Then we need also efficient distribution routes, prerequisite. Very often, sometimes you might find that people may actually have problems in transportation due to lack of transport. So transport must be available. Then the rational medicine use is critical. We've talked about this a bit earlier on. Then we've got health commodities management. We've talked about this a bit earlier. Next slide, please. Right, people are the main change agents in any system. So investment in people becomes very important, especially in their education. People really must be trained for the jobs that they are supposed to be doing. Then to make effective positive change, focus on where the action is. There is need for continuous improvement in the culture driven by positive attitudes. For instance, years ago in Zimbabwe, professionals could go for years without renewing, without undergoing any training after qualifying, and each year they will just pay money, then their practicing certificate is renewed. But that has now since changed because there is now lifelong learning. Every health professional in Zimbabwe, before they can register to practice, they have to provide evidence of having attended certain courses which and acquired the required number of points for them to be allowed to register by their registering authority. So this is now an emphasis of continuous development in learning. And a lot of this now is also now being done online, where people go online and they do exercises, they answer questions, they achieve the points, then they are re-registered. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Makondo. I'm really sorry we had to hurry you along. Now, this brings us to the end of the presentations. If we can now go to the next stage, which is a very exciting announcement. I am honored to announce the partnership between Empower School of Health and the Anglican University in Zimbabwe. And with this announcement, there is on offer 1 full scholarship and 5 partial scholarships being offered by Empower School of Health. And in terms of the scholarships and the process If this was a physical meeting, we would be requesting the participants for a round of applause. But anyway, this is a virtual meeting, and we are excited to be announcing this scholarship on this day where Anglican University in Zimbabwe are partnering with Empower School of Health. Next slide, please. Next slide, I've already talked to that one. So the fee structure of the scholarships, the full scholarship means that there is, the fee is exempted, and the total fee is actually 2,500. So it means that that 2,500 US dollars is exempted. And then the partial scholarships, what is awarded is 1,000. The scholarship is exempted. What is payable is 1,500. What is exempted is 1,000. So a participant or the successful participant will then pay an amount of 1,500, with 1,000 being discounted. Next slide, please. The process is explained in the link that is provided there, where the applicants do send in a CV and a motivating letter, and then there is a selection process. Once the selection process is completed, a transparent selection process, the successful applicant would be advised. Next slide. So basically, this is the sample of the letter that will be written. So there will be a formal letter that is written from Empower School of Health advising the successful applicant. Next slide. In addition to that, there will be a certificate of scholarship that will then be issued to the successful applicant. So it is a formal process that one will go through. Next slide. So now is the time for questions and answers. And as I had indicated earlier, that you need to post your questions in the chat box so that the panelists can address the questions. I've been going through the chat box. I haven't seen any questions yet. What I have seen are mainly comments. Perhaps Sonia, Rahul, you can assist if there are any questions that have been posted in the chat box. This is the time for the panelists to answer the questions.
We have one question about gamification.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. Andy, you want to take that?
I can, but I think also Professor Joseph, I believe, has probably got views on this as well, and he should add to that. So
sure.
Let me stress it. Gamification on its own doesn't work. It has to be part of a blended learning program. Mm-hmm. How do you minimize the disadvantages? The problem is most games are devised to be competitive. People want to win. Whereas in supply chain, we're trained to promote collaboration and cooperation together. So it requires a different kind of gaming. You don't play to win. You play to get solutions. And provided you do that rather than individuals winning, you play for the group to have success through cooperation, through collaboration, it can work. I think perhaps Professor Joseph can add to that on gamification.
Professor Matoanyika?
You need to
very much. It is particularly important. the points you mentioned, Andy, and we all need to work on it. There is a very separate area when we train at the level lower than the kind of people who are participating in here with respect, to gamification. There are processes that are taking place that we must have gamification in local languages.
Mm-hmm.
They are so differently expressive and indicative of the issues that arrive. We can share that with respect to what is happening in a number of places where we are localizing this and therefore making it more accessible, more easily, without the total, what you call it, technical and professional jargon. You still require the level you're talking about, and very much so, it is needed. But it's so easy to then separate that process from a larger basis of people who do it. The issues mentioned by Dr. Makondo, for an example, in terms of supply chain and the constraints in here. We cannot have a very successful supply chain system that is only limited purely to the professional people. And this is the point where as we go further than simply the highly professional people, right, we then need to look at the issues of language in gamification. There's a lot of work that is taking place, and we can share that. Sonia, I just wanted, as part of the scholarship, we've recommended about 4 courses that would like to start on almost straight away. In my presentation there, right at the beginning, there's a slide I'd asked that we'll talk to later. I don't know that we can get it. Ropa?
Yes. Let me read them out if the slide, sure. Yes, if it's taking some time to load the slide. There are 4 courses. The first one is Introduction to Procurement and Supply Chain Management of Pharmaceutical Products. This is a certificate course for 2 months. The second one is Procurement and Supply Chain Management Support Functions and Systems. Again, a certificate for 2 months. The third certificate is Procurement for Public Health Programs for 2 months. And then the Global Health Procurement and Supply Chain Diploma for 6 months.
Those are our proposals for now. Obviously, there is a much wider list there, as indicated in one of the presentations, that, these are the ones that we're just suggesting we're starting off with now. Hopefully, we expect to register students in July for the first 2, and by year end, we'll have started, the others as well. But there are obviously others by demand, which we're also going to start, seeking with respect. There's a lot. For an example, we already talked about gamification, but gamification is for those who are already fully involved in supply chain management systems. They will benefit most out of those, and so on and so forth. So we will share with the participants and others an orchestrated process of introducing and widening the training programs.
Thank you very much, Prof. I did request for 30 more minutes when we were still at 1 o'clock. So according to the time that I requested, we are now left with 3 minutes. Can we take one more question so that we can then do the last poll and come to the end of the webinar? Sonia or Rahul, can you pick one question from the chat box?
There's one question which has come up, which I think Professor Andy or anyone can take in, is that how best can the issue of expiry of products be tackled in the COVID-19 era by the hospitals and clinics? And similarly to that is another is how we manage inventory to minimize expiries. So actually it's a one question. So what can be done to ensure that there's minimization of expiries in COVID-19 era? So last question. So Andy.
Okay, then I think the point about this is often we don't manage expiries well. we just take the next date and send it. Sending a large volume to a rural clinic is not going to work. We need to send the short expiry medicines to large volumes, usually the hospitals, and separate. Don't just take the next one off the shelf. Think about where it's going. If it's a large volume user, split. If you've got mixed expiry dates, split them. Send a small quantity of short date with a larger quantity of longer date. Too often it's just a box off the shelf on the truck. We're not looking at the impact of what we're doing. We're just taking the first out. First in, first out. We're not looking at the expiry and the usage volume. If it's going to low usage, try to give them the longer expiry. A hospital which will use a lot, they can take the short expiry date.
I think there as well, innovative processes of distributing drugs is important. I'm educated on the Rwandan experience, for an example, of the use of drones now in supplying drugs all over the country. That should help with respect of what you're talking about, expiries and so on, so people don't have to always stock for 6 months or something like that. Then you've got a better distribution in the entire system. And I'm not too sure it costs that much, in fact, to have that kind of system like they have in Rwanda, especially if you're at the institutional level, rural clinics, district clinics, for example, not so much just for individual patients in the villages. And these are issues. That's where the innovation side of things is coming up in terms of the lifelong learning you were discussing, and discussed by Dr. Kada as well. We need to look at that, and perhaps it is part and parcel of the indirect training that we expect to do. We expect that a separate group of people need to be trained in this area alone. Innovative processes, not just innovation at the technical level, but innovation in terms of managing the human interaction processes, because they help a lot.
Okay. Thank you very much to those answers, and I will request that the panelists can look at the rest of the questions that are there, and then this can then be form a basis of further engagement in the future. We are left now with half a minute. Can we launch the last poll and quickly go through that poll? It's just 4 questions, and while the participants are completing the poll, let me thank the presenters for well-researched presentations this afternoon and for a very interactive audience. Thank you so much for making the time to participate in this webinar. And this is one of many that will be flighted. And congratulations to the partnership between Anglican University in Zimbabwe and Empower School of Health. We look forward to further engagement, as the theme of the webinar was for lifelong learning. Indeed, we look forward to lifelong learning, as was discussed this afternoon. How are we doing, Rahul, for the poll?
Yeah, we are doing great. Am I audible?
Yes, I have heard the feedback. So, what percentage?
So just to add on to your points, Roba, I also would like to thank speakers from Anglican University and the participants for being a part of this webinar. And definitely it was a good learning. And we look forward for more such events with Anglican universities in Zimbabwe and in other parts of the world. Wherever we can associate with the Anglican universities, it will be our pleasure. In terms of the poll, I think we are almost done, so we can share the results.
Thank you, Rahul. And Sonia, the link for the certificate, there's a question in the chat for the link for the certificate. The poll results are as follows. On question 1.
I will request the team to put the link for the certificate in the chat box.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, and the people can click on the link, submit their details, and their certificate will be mailed to them immediately. Within an hour, they will be getting it in their mailbox. And in case someone has not received the certificate, can approach and write to Empower School of Health and on the email IDs which have been provided in the chat box, and then we can send it again. The prospectus, presentation, and the webinar recording link will be shared to all the participants very soon, once we are ready with that to share with all. So nobody has to worry about that, so that they will be getting it. Over to you, Roba.
Thank you, Rahul. On question 1, on whether you have been involved in any lifelong learning campaign, 21% have indicated that yes, quite a lot. 39% occasionally, and another 39% they have never been. This is the first time. On the second question regarding lifelong learning sessions, they are needed in the health sector. The majority, 82%, have said yes, quite a lot of these learning sessions are required. On the third question, are you able to deal with the potential pitfalls of your learning style? 96% have said yes. And the last question on the usefulness of the webinar, 80% have indicated that this has been very useful. Thank you so much for that feedback. It guides the planning of future webinars.
Very true. Very true, Roba. So I hope the participants have clicked on the link, and they are generating their certificate. In case anyone is facing problem, can even copy it and do it. And yes, Empower team is there to support you in case of not you're not able to get the certificates in time. So with that, I think I'll thank you all for joining the webinar. Any last words from Professor Joseph? And then
I would like to thank everyone, all the participants, for taking the time and sharing. Empower Space, all the colleagues, and we look forward to future more nuanced engagements just to follow up on these issues. Excellent presentations, from our fellow colleagues, and we really appreciate this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. With those closing remarks, the page will continue being open for a little to allow the participants to complete the registration for the certificate. Otherwise, thank you so much for making time, and wish you a pleasant part of the day, whether it is an afternoon or an early evening. Wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
little one